Hello, my creative friend. Do not forget that on Wednesdays we have bite-sized videos, a dose of inspiration to help you on your creative journey, aside from these longer form episodes on Mondays. And also, thank you very much for clicking that like button right now before you minimize the tab and get to your creative work. Now go create something amazing and enjoy the episode. Your Creative Push, episode 363.
The sooner you get started on making lots of art, and even if you're making lots of bad art, that's what I did. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you can have a vision and you can execute that vision almost exactly as you envisioned it in your mind. And that's when it really becomes fun.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Will Terry. Will has been a freelance illustrator and children's book illustrator for nearly a quarter of a century, and he also co-owns SVS Learn, where he, Jake Parker, and Lee White show their actual working process as professional illustrators. And Will is also currently kickstarting his book, What They Don't Teach in Art School, an illustrator's guide to making money in the real world. And he comes on the show today to talk about that entire process, what is involved with that book, and how the creation of that book brought creativity, productivity, and fulfillment back into his life after his wife passed away. Will discusses how opportunities for artists are now everywhere, but they're just harder to see, and why going down the quote-unquote normal route of life is actually the more frightening option. He also shares how ideas like his little heroes can come out of nowhere, why creative people need to embrace their problem-solving skills, and what creatives can learn from GoPro. Will also shares how he needed to get sick of his own work in order to step up the quality of his art, and how you can find the balance of making money and creating the art that you want to create. He also talks about why you should identify your motives for creating art and why he only takes on projects that he can fall in love with, and as a result, why he has to say no to family members or friends who want him to create art for their projects. And finally, Will shares the great advice that he got from Seth Godin to create art that changes people emotionally and using your audience as a testing ground. This was another really inspiring conversation, as well as an actionable conversation with Will, and it went in directions that I didn't expect, and I was really, really delighted with the way that it turned out. So I know that you are going to be inspired as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with the one and only Will Terry. Will, welcome back to Your Creative Push, my friend.
Hey, glad to be here.
No, I'm glad to have you back. It's been a couple years now, and a lot has happened in both of our lives. But maybe the biggest thing, at least I think, the thing that made us reconnect is that you're launching a new Kickstarter, and it's a book that I think should be in the hands of everybody that's listening. So I was like, I need to get you on the show. I already have my signed copy. Or I don't have it, but I've pledged for my signed copy.
Oh,
and I know
cool.
that you had kind of an overwhelming response. So hopefully by the time people listen to this, there's still some availability to get all of the different rewards. So I guess, first of all, congrats on this successful launch so far. But could maybe you tell everybody what this book's all about, how it came to be? Just tell the whole story of how this thing happened.
Sure. And if I run too long, just stop me.
No, we love running long. The less talking I have to do, the better. Nobody wants to hear me.
Well, thanks a lot for supporting the Kickstarter and all.
Oh, yeah.
This book is a book that I've wanted to make for at least a decade. Prior to that, I always thought that I would make an anthology book of my artwork. But as I started teaching at UVU, teaching illustration at UVU, and then later started Folio Academy, which then kind of gave rise to svslearn.com, where we teach illustrators how to be the art side of illustration online. But I've always had an affinity for helping illustrators make money with their art. So when I was teaching at UVU, I would always leave a class period or two during the semester where I would just kind of have a marketing talk with my students. And early on, I was, I would hear comments either in the post. I can't remember they call them they give a survey to the students to ask them, like how they like their teacher and all. And
Should Professor Terry still work here?
exactly, like, yeah, should we get rid of this kid? Yeah. So, but I would see in the comments, because I got it was wrong. I think that I got to see them. They were anonymous, but I think the teachers shouldn't have been able to see them. But anyway, they would comment on those. A lot of times it'd be like, that one class that you did made my whole art education worth it. Like just breaking down how to market your illustration, or those classes where you talked about the business side was priceless, and we need more of that, and we need a whole semester of that kind of a thing. And then, and at the same time, I started a YouTube channel under my name, Will Terry, just to, I found that I was given the same advice over and over. And like, I'd give advice to a student, and then another student would walk up, like, this is like after class, and they'd like start over, cause I missed the first half. And so I was like, man, this would work so much better if I just put it in video form. Anyway, my whole YouTube channel, I didn't do my shtick was, I didn't show people how to make art. I showed people how to market their art. And so for the last 10 years, I've been thinking, I've been giving all this advice. It's all in video form, but maybe it should be in book form as well, where I can kind of go into a little more detail, and I can you can show things in a book that you can't really show in video. And so anyway, this has been a book that I've kind of procrastinated in some ways, because it was always a daunting task to get started on it. Quite frankly,
Yeah.
it was, well, I know I'm going to do it, and I have everything. And one day I sat down and made an outline, and I was like, this is going to be amazing. And I've got this book that I can do whenever I get a lull in my schedule. And, and I just never did.
Yeah, I know all about that.
Yeah.
Waiting for the lull.
Yeah. And it was there, and I'm like, well, it's going to get done. I know I'm going to do it. I get things done, and I do. And I knew that I would eventually do it. And then some days I would panic, because I'd think, what if I die before I get this out there? Like, which is a really morbid thought, but in my mind, it's like, I know there are people that need this book, and it would be a shame if I couldn't get it out. And so I started to get scared about not doing it. And then, last June, my wife died unexpectedly, just out of the blue. And did you know that?
I did, yeah.
Okay. And
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is 2019 was the worst year, and in some ways the best year, because there were so many things that changed in our family. I mean, like, it was like a bomb going off when Lori died. And then two of my sons who were married ended up getting divorced. And so it was just really, really kind of sad that way. But then I met this true love woman, and ended up marrying her. It was really
Yay,
quick,
Lily.
Yeah, Lily. And I mean, like, it was, from the outside looking in, it would look crazy, but I can just tell you that my faith in God is where I put that. I really feel like we were kind of led to be together.
That's great, man.
Yeah. And so anyway, so that was awesome. And then my oldest son ended up getting married, and he would never have gotten married if his mom hadn't died, So it was like this incredibly horrible thing that gave rise to other bad things, but a lot of really good things. And anyway, one of the things that happened was I couldn't draw. I, like, right at, a couple weeks after she died, the dust starts to settle a little bit, where you're like, and I had never gone through anything like this, of losing someone that close to me. I mean, I lost my mom, but she had been dying for a decade from Alzheimer's. So we had been losing her over time, but I had never gone through anything like this. And you eventually you're like, in your mind, you're like, well, I have to be normal again. I have to find some way of being normal. And so I would sit down and try to draw. I'm like, I'll just take my mind off of it by drawing. Every morning you wake up and it's like you have to relive the fact that your wife is gone, that your spouse, and so then you try to find purpose. You try to find things to do. So you get busy doing chores and meaningless things that need to be done. But then I would try to draw and use my creative side, and I couldn't. And for like at the 4-week mark, I still couldn't draw anything. I even went, I went into our office for SVS Learn, and, Jake and Lee were like, take all the time you want, and you don't, we've got everything covered. Don't worry about it. And just, if you feel like coming in, come in. And so I was like, well, I'm going to come in, but I'm just going to draw stuff. And I couldn't, everything I started to draw, I didn't care about. It was like, it was just gone. Right. The only thing that I found I could do was write this book, which was weird because like I looked at my outline and I'm like, at first I was like, well, maybe I'll just start writing the book. And I had the outline with chapter headings, and then I had all the subheads under that. So I just said, well, I'm just take a subhead and see if I can write it. And boom, 3 paragraphs later, it was done. And I'm like, wow, and so I just came in every day for the next couple of months and just wrote on this book. And then I think I finished it last August. So it was like, I think it was about 4 months, and I was able to write it. And it just, after a while, it was so fun to work on and so fulfilling, and just so like, this is the book that I would have wanted. When I got out of school in 92, which kind of dates me a little bit, but but there was a book by Stephen Heller, who was I believe he was the senior art director for the New York Times. And one of the things that he did was he prided himself in giving every illustrator that asked him, that approached him for a job, that he would figure out a way to give them a job at the New York Times, doing an illustration. The good news is he would try to fit everybody in. The bad news is he would never hire the same illustrator twice, because he looked at himself as, I want to be able to give illustrators their break, their first real job. So he wrote a book called The Business of Illustration. And it was similar. I mean, my book is similar to what he was doing at that time, where it was advice on how to break into the business of illustration, how to sell your work, and how to become a freelance illustrator. But so much has changed since he released his book. I mean, he released his book pre-internet. And now the tools that we have as artists are so vast. And I actually believe that's one of the biggest challenges that anyone, let's say anyone in their early 30s or younger, really, really face a challenge, in that they grew up with the internet pretty much, So they grew up with a lot of the some of the most amazing changes I think we've had in our world history, and they grew up right after they were happening. And so I think a lot of them don't really see them as important as they really are, or as life-changing as they are. So for instance, if you're a musician, you used to have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to make a demo tape, to record your music. And now you can do it from home. I mean, like, anybody that has a home computer can probably pirate a copy of Reason and and record, So that barrier, that there was a financial barrier that has just been removed. And you could see the same thing in every artistic field. So for writers, you used to have to go through a publisher, and gatekeepers are still necessary. They still do a good job of weeding out and curating, but at the same time, there's a lot of niche books that are being published now and doing really, really well, simply because a publisher doesn't see 50,000 copies being sold, but to a creator, 5,000 copies is life-changing to sell on their own,
Yeah,
Uh,
especially when you get such a large percentage of the profit.
exactly.
Yeah.
So everything has changed now. The hard thing, I think, for artists is to actually see the opportunities where they are, because they're in different places. We were programmed to find opportunities in one or two places, and now they're everywhere, but they're harder to see. And so my book is an attempt to open people's minds and eyes on where they can find new opportunities, to make a living doing the thing that they wanted to do, which is create art.
And do you think like a big reason that people struggle to see those opportunities is because of the system that was in place before, because of those gatekeepers, because they think that an opportunity only comes when a gatekeeper gives them an opportunity, as opposed to like, do you think that there's less value, or people see less value in carving your own opportunity? Like, do you think that they think that that's cheating somehow, or that they don't quite have the authority or the permission to do it, or
Yeah.
that if they do it themselves, that they're not as worthy as somebody that gave them, say, a book deal or a record deal?
All of those things are true. Every
Yeah.
single one of them. And on top of it, we have not been taught to believe in ourselves. The other thing we're dealing with is, parents came from the old system. So parents want their kids to fit in with doing things the way that they did them, and the old world. It's very hard. Like, I mean, like you take someone like a Matthew Inman, and I have a lot of examples of artists who have done exactly what I'm talking about in the book. So Matthew Inman, the creator of the oatmeal, I believe he was in school, to become an accountant. He was taking business classes and accounting classes, and that was his trajectory. And then he started this webcomic called The Oatmeal, which I'm sure a lot of people know about because it's wildly popular.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine the conversations that he must have had with his parents when he's like, "Yeah, I'm quitting school to pursue this webcomic instead of being an accountant," you know, and and people might not know him by his name, or they might not know him by the oatmeal, but I bet a lot of people that are listening right now know him from Exploding Kittens, which
Mhm.
did, I believe, on Kickstarter $8 million gross.
It's me and my friend's favorite game. We love
Oh,
Exploding
really?
Kittens. Yeah.
So, and a lot of people would scoff at the examples that I'll use, and they'll say, "Well, they got lucky."
Mm.
Well, did they, or were they tenacious in how many failures they had? Because most successful artists who are wildly successful, if you ask them to talk about their failures, which to me is way more interesting, everyone knows about the successes. You can read about them online. You can Wikipedia them. But what about the failures? Because the failures are where the lessons were learned to create the success.
I love that you said that, because I think like one of my whole
Uh-huh.
theses, whatever. One of my big talking points, or something that I really believe in, is the fact that people should be sharing their mistakes, sharing their failures, instead of this like kind of cookie cutter perfect persona and sort of career path, or their art path that they show online. It gets so hard then when you're following all these people that seem like all they do is succeed, to feel like you're worthy of success, or that you're doing it right. Like that the fact that you're failing and failing and failing over again isn't a worthwhile pursuit, which I definitely think it is. You learn
Hmm.
what doesn't work, and you keep going, and you keep kind of building that drive and
Yeah.
that bravery to keep going.
Yep.
And even on the 3 Points Perspective podcast, Jake was talking about, I think he was kind of like joking about the fact that his dad says he should still be a surgeon, I think, or a doctor or
Uh-huh.
something like that. But even today, like even as he's built a successful career for himself and gained notoriety, it's like you still have that voice in the back of your head where it's like society or parents or teachers or whatever it is in the back of your head telling you that the thing that you're doing, even if you are succeeding, isn't a worthwhile pursuit, and you should be doing something quote unquote normal.
Yeah. Quote unquote normal. Oh, that's it's and if I can teach people that that's actually the more scary option, then I've won. Because that to me is the more scary option. And the reason I say that is because everyone has, at least everyone that would consider themselves an artist or that is trying to cultivate the art side of themselves, you know, like, because everyone has a right brain, you know, everyone has that creative side, right? But are we using it? Everyone has projects, or everyone has ideas that, if cultivated and if they were able to get them out, then I believe the world, you know, is a better place for it. And like, let me give you an example. That would be a better way to describe this. There are projects that I've done that are personal projects that before the project, I had no idea that I was going to create that thing. So, for example, my Comic-Con series, or, you know, comic convention series of Little Heroes, was something that 5 years ago, I didn't even see myself doing. I didn't even know, I didn't have a desire to do it. It wasn't on the radar. I didn't imagine myself doing it. It was never a dream. I was bouncing along as a children's book illustrator. And then, you know, because I was teaching illustration at the university, I was exposed to students who were starting to table at comic conventions. So I had a student that was like, "Hey, can I have more time on this project? Because I have Salt Lake City Comic-Con coming up this weekend, and I'm not going to be able to get to it." And I'm like, "Oh, what are you doing?"
What a great excuse.
Yeah.
Like,
And when I found out what they were doing, I was like, "Absolutely, you can have more time.
yeah.
Wow, this is cool. When is it? Maybe I'll go." And so I ended up going, because I wasn't in the comic world at all. I don't know where I was. I was just focused on children's books, and I didn't even know it really existed. And so I followed down that rabbit hole, and I'm like, well, I'm going to come out and see. And I found out I had like 3 students that were displaying their work. And I was like, well, I'm going to come and support you. So I went and I saw what was going on, and it was great to see my students, but more so, I'm like, I could be doing some of this, you know, like, because there's a disconnect with when you're a children's book illustrator, in that your audience doesn't have a wallet and your audience doesn't even know they like you as an artist. You know, it's like their parents are like, "Here, we're going to read this book." And
Interesting. I
you know
never
what I
even thought
mean?
about that. Yeah.
So you never have, as a children's book illustrator, you never really have true fans. You have the parents that are like, "My kid would like this." And I kind of like it, but I like the idea of reading it to them, but they're not really fanning out on you unless you win a Caldecott or something. And then it's like, people like to get near what they perceive as famous people, like, I got my picture taken with so-and-so, kind of a thing. And there are true fans, I guess, that are adults, like librarians and stuff for illustrators. But in general, your audience is 3 or 4 or 5, at least mine is, they don't even know who I am. So the idea of doing art and selling it to people who actually fall in love with it was pretty appealing. And so it was funny because, I started making some characters, and I just started doing them on my own, just for fun, just in free time. And I didn't really have the idea of selling them until I really started sharing them on social media, and people started really responding to them. And then I thought, okay, maybe I have something here. And I was doing parodies of known IP, known characters and things like that. And trying to do a really funny twist, a funny take on that character. And they took off. And like 4 years later, 140 characters, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue that we made from different shows, getting a partner who then took it on the road for me and was selling all around the country at different comic conventions. And I'm pretty much done with that project now. But the point that I'm making with this is, I look back, and there was the time before Little Heroes, and now there's the time after Little Heroes, and I didn't see that project happening. And now it exists, and now it exists in book form and prints. And, I have opportunities to sell those characters to companies that have the licenses, have the the Disney license to use on, point of purchase merchandising and things like that. And that's all something that just kind of came from being open-minded to new possibilities.
And so what, let me think how to ask this. So one of the things we talk about on the show is the importance of doing work for you, doing work that you enjoy without thinking about, your audience or whether it will sell or, whether it will take you, on a multi-year journey like
Mm-hmm.
Little Heroes did for you.
Mm-hmm.
But comparing that to what you talk about in your new book, where should creative people's mindsets be as they start to do a project? Should they completely disregard like what it's going to end up being, whether it's marketable? Like, should they just create first and then sort of have a day where they sit and think about, okay, what can this thing end up being? Or is it just sharing it and seeing what takes off? Or like where do you draw the line from disconnecting from
Mm-hmm.
marketing to having marketing kind of always running in the back of your head? If does that question make sense?
Yeah, and all of everything you just said is a yes.
Uh-oh.
And so the thing is, every project is different, and different projects become successful for different reasons. But in general, I think that what you were saying is good advice, in that you should, in general, create for yourself and be as selfish as possible and create the thing that you want, that you can't find out in the world somewhere. The thing that, and you create this thing for yourself because you want one. You want it. You want it hanging on your wall, or you want it, you want the physical object made. And so you make a prototype, you make the thing for yourself. And then guess what? Out of 7 billion people on this planet, even if a 1/10% or a 1/10% was like you and found value in it, then the marketing comes later, and just finding those people. And there's ways to find those people that are just like you. But the mistake that I think a lot of people make is that they make something hoping that someone else will like it. So they're not satisfying their own urge. If you put money, as the goal, like, I'm going to make these things because I'm going to sell a ton of them, everything is backwards, and it almost never works that way. You have to make the thing that makes you happy. So for instance, I like to say I could have started GoPro.
Yeah.
Did I talk about this on our podcast?
No, but
Okay.
I've heard you talk about this, but please share that,
Okay.
because I think that's it.
Yeah, like
It's like, damn it.
yeah, I could and I couldn't have, because I didn't. So anyway, before GoPro, the waterproof video cameras, the little video cameras that were started out, the first generations were horrible. I mean, they worked, but the resolution was terrible. And now they're being used to. I mean, they're used in TV productions, and so the company's just gone nuts. I believe a couple of years ago they were valued at $2 billion out of just this guy's idea. He was a surfer, and he wanted to film himself in the water. So he needed a waterproof camera, but he needed a little tiny one, and everything was big and bulky at the time. And he wanted it to be digital. And this was a time when digital video was just in its infancy. And I was, at the same time, I was snowboarding with my kids, and I wanted a camera that I could mount to my snowboard and film them in front of me, or I could handhold it. But whatever happened, if we're shredding and it's a wet, slushy day, and the slush sprays up on the camera, it's not going to ruin my camera. And I had a Canon camera with a wide angle lens that was one of the first digital cameras with a wide angle lens. And I think I paid like $300 for it, and I didn't want to destroy it. So I took, because I play racquetball, I saw I needed a plastic case for this thing. So I looked around through my junk drawers and through everything, and I finally found this hard plastic, clear plastic racquetball goggles case. And I was like, oh, that's almost the right size, but it needs to be sawed and melted and bent and then welded with like, I used like a little map gas torch, to kind of melt it together so it could it had to have a Velcro hinge on the back so I could get my camera in and out of it. And anyway, I made this thing and I put Velcro on it and I mounted it to my snowboard and it worked. I didn't care enough to make that a business because I was already, I had plenty of time trying to be an illustrator and never thought about marketing it to other people. But the guy who started GoPro did, he made one for himself first and he used it. And he was able to share cool videos of his surfing that no one else had at the time. And I think part of his story was that other people started asking for him. His friends started wanting them. So he's made some for them. And then, the rest is history. So I think the best advice is you make the thing for yourself because you think it's cool and you want one. And then you let the market find you in the beginning is a really good way to do it. So,
right. Well, I think the real lesson here is that you should have more snowboarding friends because if you did, then they would ask you to make one and then you'd be a billionaire.
And then I would have been I probably would have still been late. He was probably in front of me. And so I probably would have failed to go pro.
No, but I think that's a perfect example. And it might be a great segue into, your book is all about things that they don't teach you in art school. But one story that I've heard you share about something that you did learn in art school was kind of along the same line of about what creative people are supposed to do or what creative people are supposed to be. So if you wouldn't mind, could you share that lesson?
Yeah, I had this teacher when I was a freshman that drove me crazy and he drove everyone else crazy. And he was a really eccentric kind of a guy. As many things as I could criticize him for now, he did have some really valuable things to say. And one of them was, and he was spot on. And I struggled to understand what he meant at the time, but over the years, I have really embraced his advice on this one particular thing, which was don't be satisfied with the world that is offered to you. If you go to the store and you can't find the tool or the thing that you need to do the thing you want to do, make it. You're creative. You guys are all creative people and creative people are problem solvers. And he really drove that home that in order to be successful as an artist, you have to be innovative and you have to think of solutions to problems that might not exist in the world yet. And so many times I have seen people quit because they couldn't find the thing they were looking for to solve the problem they have. So they just kind of gave up on that problem and maybe they found a workaround, but they didn't really solve the problem they were looking for. So like, for example, for me with the GoPro, I could have just wristed the camera and just handheld it and hoped that it didn't get wet and kept it in my pocket and stuff like that. Or I could have come up with a cheap solution to put some sort of a cheap covering over it that didn't really work. I've always done that. I have made things to help me solve the problem that I have, in the physical world. That same thing transfers over into making art, as a visual 2D artist, I'm, a composition, every single composition is a problem to solve. And hopefully you're not always, because we always rip ourselves off as artists, but hopefully in a year you come up with 5 or 10 pieces that you've done that really feel original to you. And the only way you get there is to really have an open mind and go through the problem solving process, because every composition or every illustration has its own unique challenges and own problems. I mean, you're dealing with different numbers of characters doing different things in different environments. You're trying to show those things in interesting ways. And, there's always a boring solution, but as an artist, hopefully you have enough pride in your work, in your own work and your own desire to leave a mark in this world that you don't want to be forgotten, so that you will work the problem and stick with it and work it multiple times if necessary to come up with the more interesting solution. And as artists, that's what we do. We make the world a better place. We make the world more interesting. We don't settle. So yeah, I love the advice of making the thing that you need, because I think it makes you a better artist.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that one of the hardest parts about the creative process as you're making something, especially if you're making something new where you don't really know how you're going to be able to get to the end result that you sort of have in your mind floating
Uh-huh.
around, is that the whole problem solving phase of it. And it's like one of the, I think that idea of, okay, I don't know exactly how to do this, or I know this is going to take multiple tries, whatever it may be for you, that is what holds people back from getting started in the first place. Like, even if it is just sitting down to get to work, it's that not wanting to have to put in that hard work, like going to the gym, not wanting to have to like push up those weights. And I think that advice from your teacher is so important. And now that I'm a homeowner, I feel
Uh-huh.
like I've had to figure out so many things that, I'll look up YouTube videos on how to, like, so for example, 2 weeks ago, I had to fix our cabinet drawer where the hinges were off. And it
Uh-huh.
took me about like 2 full days to figure this thing out. It took about 3 trips to Lowe's and 1 trip to Home Depot,
Uh-huh.
like just to get this drawer to go in and out. And it took a bunch of creative attempts to figure out how to do it. But once I finally figured it out and rigged it in a way that it worked, it was very satisfying. It's so satisfying. So for any creative person to have that mentality that no matter what, you're going to figure this out. If the solution doesn't exist, you're going to find a creative solution to be able to figure it out, whether it's mounting a camera to your snowboard or whatever it may be. If you have that mentality for all aspects of your life, then art becomes a little bit easier. It becomes easier to sit down and get through those ugly stages where it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to get to that result that you're looking for. But I think that that's the mentality that we all need to sort of not accept, but like come to grips with. Like, you're a creative person, so like just put in the work, figure it out, and the world and your life will be a much better existence as a result.
Absolutely.
You also, in one of your episodes of the podcast, 3 Points Perspective, you were talking about. I know you took on a ton of work when you were, I guess, in the early stages of your career, where you're
Mm-hmm.
making a ton of money,
Mm-hmm.
but taking on perhaps too many projects. And maybe this will be like a good opportunity to talk about that balance of finding, for artists out there, like finding jobs or finding ways to create revenue to make money, but not sort of selling out, like finding that balance of creating good art and also making money.
That's a tough one because, and it's funny because I'm always very hesitant to say what I should have done, or, to say, well, if I could go back, I would change the past so that my present would be better. But, it's like that. If you mess with something, you have no idea exactly what you would be changing in the future. So I guess what I'm saying is, for me, my path was that I did a ton of work, and I have to believe that there were a lot of benefits in doing that. Like, my brain needed to finally get sick of doing lots of crappy work, crappy illustration work, because the results were really, really not good on a lot of the early work that I did. And I had a lot of clients that I'm sure were, I was working for a lot of magazines, and the nice thing about a magazine is it's here for the month that it's published, and then it's gone, and it's kind of forgotten about forever. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, whereas doing book publishing, books can hang around forever. So the good news is all that really terrible artwork is going to be forgotten about and is gone, and no one really looks at it anymore. And I think that the benefit from doing that was that I needed to get sick of myself. I needed to get sick of what I was doing in order to say, I need to really start doing quality work. Whereas my friend, Brett Helquist, who did, who a lot of people would know him from illustrating the series of Unfortunate Events, he did the opposite. If he didn't feel like he had enough time to do his best work, he didn't take the job. Every single piece of art he ever tried, ever made for a client was his absolute best. And I couldn't say that. I could say the opposite, that I saw dollar signs and just really just plowed through tons of illustration work in the 90s and even in the early 2000s until finally I was like, I wasn't getting repeat work from a lot of clients. And I'm like, there's only so many clients out there. Eventually I'm going to run out if I don't start doing better work. But I think I needed to purge that out. I needed to see this vast pile of horrible paintings to be able to go, this sucks, and there's more to it. And then when I started doing children's books, I really, really amped up my quality and really started to care a lot more. So I don't know if that's going down the road that you wanted me to go down, but
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties into like the idea of a hell yes or a heck yes,
uh-huh.
however you want to call it. Like, is that the litmus test then for people to, if they want to do a project, if they've been given an opportunity to ask themselves like, are you like super stoked to do it, and
Yeah.
if so, do it, or is there a point where maybe yes is
Yeah.
like are okay like early enough, you know what I mean?
So then, yeah, there's so many aspects, and I do talk about this in the book as well, is like deciding what jobs to take. I think one thing you have to do is you have to identify your motivations. So sometimes the motivation is just going to be money. Sometimes it's going to be the pure love of doing that particular assignment. In other words, sometimes you can work on your own portfolio and come up with projects that you really want to do that will make your portfolio look better. But sometimes clients come along with a project that you would have never thought of. They have a really tiny budget, so you can't do it for the money because there's just no money there. But man, when you look at the project, you're like, oh, this is exactly what the kind of thing I want to do, and I couldn't think of it on my own. So there's doing it for the love, there's doing it for the money. There's the combination. Maybe the money's decent. Maybe you also really love it. That's great when they both align, or when the money's great and you love it. That's the absolute best place to be. One of the worst motivators is doing it for someone else, which sounds wrong because I'm definitely big on service and serving other people and helping other people and doing service projects and doing things pro bono. And I help a lot of students for free that just ask me. And I believe in that. And I really believe in helping your fellow man out. But with art, I don't believe that you're helping anyone out when you agree to do a project for someone else. Like my sister-in-law or my aunt has written a children's book and wants me to illustrate this. I think that's the absolute worst. Because if you don't love it and you're not getting paid, then almost every time, like, I will get questions from students and from people on the internet all the time, like, what do I do? I agreed to do this book for my aunt because I love her and blah, 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 and she's done so much for me, but I hate this project so much and I'm not getting it done. What should I do? And that's the trap. It really is. When you try to create art from someone, art is selfish. The reason that we make great art is because we have a vision, because we want something to exist in the world that doesn't exist. When someone else tries to convey their vision, sometimes it works if you can adopt it and make it your own. But most of the time, I would say it's always going to remain their vision. And usually they don't understand boundaries and don't understand how art is made. And so they end up trying to art direct it without any art directing skills. And the best art directors don't do anything anyway. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The best art directors choose the artists that they think will be able to execute, and they let them run with it. And they take what they get because they know that the only way they can get the best art is to leave the artist alone. So
Right.
as far as, like, to me, the hell yes is the money's good and you can't wait to wake up in the morning so you can start working on this project again.
How do you say no then to Aunt Sandy or whoever it may be that's
Oh,
created the
man.
book? Because like I've had, obviously not that exact scenario, but I've had situations like that as well, and it's
Yeah.
like I've always opted to just do it.
Yep.
Like just do a favor.
That's actually how you say no. You don't say no to the first or the second one because you don't
Mm.
know. You have to go through it and want to kill yourself. And then it's easy to say no to Uncle Bob right after that. There's nothing worse. I used to get myself into this situation. I have a thing in my office. I can't say because the person might hear this.
Okay.
Who knows? If they heard it, it would hurt their feelings. I have this object that I agreed to do 20 years ago, a piece of art for this person because they were going to another country and they were going to bring this thing back. And I agreed to do this piece of art. And then the person heavily art directed it and I couldn't get it done. Finally I got it done and it was horrible and I hated it. And I don't think that the person liked the art that I traded them for this object they were going to bring back from another country. Anyway, it doesn't work. And you have to do that. And I've done that at least 20 times. It always takes me longer to learn a lesson than most people. So I've been in that situation 20 times and now it's so easy to say no. And people know not to ask, they I let them down easy. I just say, I only take projects that I can fall in love with. And you only want me to take your project if I can fall in love with it. So if it's a family member, I will look at it and like, send it over. And then I just say, I don't think I can fall in love with this. And you know what I mean? Like, like, what can you say to that? Well, you have to love it. I don't love it.
Right.
Like
I like it and I think you have a great vision, but it's not for me.
Yeah. My policy, how do you argue with someone's policy? My policy is that I only take projects that I absolutely fall in love with. I don't love this one, but you do. And you'll find someone that can fall in love with it. And that's really what will make it the best is when you find that person who can fall in love with it. You won't want the art that I would create for this. Oh yes, I would.
Right.
Yeah, I would. You're so good. No, you really wouldn't. And you're going to do good and you're going to find, well, then can you find some, no, that's a personal decision to find an artist. So, you're.
Yeah. It's like going on not just going on a date with somebody that you're not into,
Mm-hmm.
but like having to not necessarily marry them, but like marry them for like 3 or 4 months.
Right.
And go on multiple dates with them and spend a lot of time with them. And neither person's going to end up being happy about that.
Like, wouldn't you rather just be turned down?
Yeah, I would.
But yeah, I mean, like, it's the kinder thing to do,
Yeah, totally.
Um,
You mentioned before, like, about the creation process and creating something that you love, that something that doesn't exist in the world that you want to bring into the world. And then later on, people will find that. People that are like you will find that. What are some ways that artists can expedite that process or to help to ease along that conversion of finding those people, of putting the work in front of those people that will jive with it and that will become your like kind of true fans?
Right. Well, the obvious answer is social media. What I find is people that will scoff at the idea of using social media as a product testing ground are people who have yet to create something that people really care about. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever read was in Seth Godin's Linchpin book, where, he said, his definition of art is creating something that changes the viewer or the person that's interacting with your art in an emotional way that changes them emotionally. So they were going along in their day, they bump into whatever it is you created and it actually changes their emotion. And it's funny how many people don't understand this. Like, they're like, yeah, I get it. It changes emotion. No, like, really, it interrupts them. It changes them. They're not the same in that moment. They were the way they were, and now they're different because of the art that you gave them, the gift that you gave them. It either made them angry or it made them sad or it made them happy or it made them excited or whatever emotion, and so everyone scrolls Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and you see creative things and it changes you emotionally. It makes you laugh or it makes you angry or whatever. And if you're not creating art that's changing people emotionally, according to Seth Godin, you're not creating art, and I tend to agree. I tend to adopt that. So we might be making pretty pictures, But if it doesn't change people, then it's not art. Now, it doesn't have to change everyone. Luckily, you need the 0.1%
Yeah.
So now on social media, if you have 100 followers or 100 people that are your friends, that's not a good pool to test in. I mean, because now you're relying on changing one person emotionally, and one person, it's just not a big enough sample size, right?
Mhm.
So people really need to participate in social media to gain an audience large enough to where they can test their art. An example of this, and this is a woman that I put in the book. Her name is Piper Thibodeau, and
Yeah, she's been on the show.
oh, has she been on the show? Okay, great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's great.
yeah, and I love her work, and she and I have talked a bunch of times, and I'm really inspired by her because there's many reasons and things that she's even asked me not to talk about. She doesn't want. There's certain things that she's a pretty private person in
Sure.
a lot of
Yeah.
ways, but she I admire her in so many ways, but one of them is that she just is. I mean, she just sits down, puts her nose to the grindstone, and just works every day. And I mean, if you've had her on the show, your listeners have probably already know that she was doing the daily painting, and
Yeah,
that's
she's the definition of prolific.
yeah. I mean, like I mean, and a lot of students will ask me, well, yeah, but how do I? I say, well, social media, and oh, social media, and it's like, and I'll even have some students that are like, I don't do social media, I can't handle the drama and stuff. I'm like, there's ways to do it where you don't. I mean, you just post your art. I'm telling them, on one hand, I'm saying, hey, this woman has worked for DreamWorks, she's worked for Nickelodeon, she's worked for Sesame Street, and a bunch of other really high profile clients while she was a student in school. And here's how she did it. And you're going to tell me, oh, I don't want to do social media, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but really, like, that is, I think that's the first step, because you can test for free. When I launched my Little Heroes series, which wasn't even called Little Heroes when I launched it, it was just one character at a time. I could really quickly see what people were responding to. And I really figured out that product line based on the responses that I was getting. And, I'd do one day and get, a fourth of the response that I would get from the one the previous day. And I was able to analyze the two and go, oh, okay, it's the concept. It's not the art. I mean, it's not the
Mm.
visual art. It's
Mhm.
I mean, the concept is part of the art, but it's the combination of the two, because the concept is what's changing people emotionally. The concept is what people are responding to. Yeah, I need to have a certain proficiency at being able to convey that idea through the visual art, but I could have given my ideas to 100 different artists, and they could have been successful with the ideas that I was coming up with. And I also I crowdsourced a lot of my ideas. So I would I would want to do a specific character, and I couldn't come up with a good idea. And I knew that I wasn't coming up with a good idea. And the reason that I knew I wasn't coming up with a good idea is because after I had done about 20 characters, when I did come up with a good idea on my own, I was like, that's it. I love that idea. I can't wait to draw that because it's funny.
Mm.
And other people are going to think it's funny. And I was rarely wrong about that. But whenever I had an idea that I was like, yeah, that's good enough. That'll work. And I would, and I kept a Google Doc of these ideas. And I would, if I had an idea that was kind of like, that's an okay idea, that's good, I wouldn't execute it. My rule was, I'll wait and hope a better idea comes and bumps it off the shelf and replaces it. And sometimes I would take those characters and put a challenge out there on Facebook and say, hey, I'm going to send you a Amazon gift card, or send you out to dinner a $50 gift certificate if I use your idea. So in the comments, if you have a good idea and I use it, I'll make good on this. And I did. And I would get all kinds of great ideas. And sometimes I use those. And then I had my own boys who, were either late teenagers or early 20s at the time. And I told them, anytime you come up with an idea, I'll pay you for it. And I probably have, in the 150 characters, have about 15 or maybe 20, 25 from my boys.
Oh,
And then
wow.
other friends, like just friends would see what I'm doing. And they're like, I have an idea for this character. You got to do it. And it would be a great idea. And I would end up doing it and sending them to dinner. So yeah, you got to make art that is worth someone taking the time to talk about. Likes are free, and likes are a good indication based on the percentage of followers you have. But then from there, eventually you have to put money behind it. You have to make the thing, which can cost you. You have to print the thing or reproduce the thing or sculpt the thing or whatever. And then there are ways to even identify your audience even further. There are so many tools out there right now that my suggestion for once you do start to see some success on your own is that then you just have to find someone who's good at marketing online, which is what I'm doing right now. We're doing that with our school, and I did that. I've done that with other books that I've launched, and also with this current book. I'm working with a marketing guy who I partnered with because I just don't know how to do a lot of the things that he knows how to do online to identify the audience. And I'll just give you an idea right now. And I have no idea how to do this, but I know that this is one of the things that marketers do right now. Facebook has apps for marketing, and you can take your email list. Like, let's say you have your own personal website and you are capturing emails on your site. You say, well, if you sign up on my site, then when I have an announcement, I'll send you an announcement. I won't spam you, blah, 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 Yeah, and everyone has seen how people capture emails like that. Well, if you have 500 or 1,000 emails, you can import those emails into a Facebook app, which will, the app will say, okay, out of the 1,000 emails you just submitted, 600 of them have used that same email address to create their Facebook account. And so we know who these people are, and we know what their habits are. We know what they like. We know what they buy. We know what they don't like. So if you can say, well, these people like these certain keywords, and they'll say, okay, yeah, we know out of your 600, 100 of them buy stuff like you're trying to sell. And if you want to pay us money, we will identify out of our database other people, and they call them lookalike lists, that look just like the emails. Their behaviors are just like the people that you submitted, the 100 people that we.
Whoa.
It's crazy stuff. And, and some people are like, well, that's dark and it's invasive and stuff. But the way I look at it is like this. If someone likes your art and they've signed up on your email list, and you go through this process and you follow it all the way through, if it shows up randomly on someone's Facebook feed and it's the exact thing that they like and they end up buying it, who got hurt? I mean,
you're doing them a favor.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's exactly your thing, is exactly what they like. So now they want the thing that you created. It's a reality. It's happening all the time. Our phones are listening to us. It's just, It's not a coincidence. And when you talk about a certain product, all of a sudden there it is on Facebook, So
that's amazing. Yeah, I geek out on that kind of stuff. That's really cool to know that exists, though. And but I mean, and you're right. Like, they're doing it anyway, so you might as well jump on, like, and give them something like valuable that they want, as opposed to a new refrigerator or something.
Yeah.
But what you said, I think I was just sitting listening to you talk about just like using your following, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't do. They build a following, but it's just what for? It's just to build one at a time, like 100, 1,000, like just to keep increasing the number. But like that following is a tool. Like, it's a tool that you can use, like you said, for testing, also for idea generation, but also like to be surprised with what takes off, like what you share that resonates with people, that takes off, that makes you sit and ponder and think, okay, well, maybe I can go in this direction, whatever that direction is. But yeah, I think people are so overthinking the numbers and just growing the numbers that they don't really think about what, the other people on the end of it, and the fact that they can be, I don't want to say used, but like you can use them as a tool to help you as an artist.
Well, and they've opted in. If they're your friend or they're your follower, they already like what you're doing. They want to see what you're up to. They want to see what you're doing. They want to see the new thing that you have. And we, with this, what they don't teach in art school book, we funded in 5 minutes. And the reason we funded in 5 minutes was because a lot of the people that were following me were on YouTube or on Instagram or on Facebook or on Twitter. And they had already said, yeah, I want to see more of what you're doing. And then I teased this book for a while because we were going to release it before the COVID virus hit,
Yeah.
and we had it all queued up in the podcast and everything. And then I had to make some announcements saying, hey, the book didn't launch, after we had already been talking about it. So when I did the pre-launch and told everybody on my feeds, they were like, oh yeah, so you are going to do it. Okay, great. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen next week. Okay. I'm going to be ready, and it was a real easy launch to just kind of put it out there. But, 10 years ago, I don't know how old is Facebook now? Is it 10 or 12 years old or something?
Well, I know that I signed up for it in 2009 when I was in, 2005 when I was in college.
Okay. So it's about,
but it existed before then, but that was back in the days where the college had to sign up for it. It was just colleges. So, yeah, it's at least 15
I remember
years old.
One of my sisters was like, you got to get on Facebook. And I was resistant for like a year. I'm like, what do I need that for? Cause I'm not always, I don't always know what is going to be valuable. Like,
right.
And,
just like GoPro.
Yeah. And, but yeah, like after a while it became this thing that you can't ignore,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Well, I've kept you for a long time, so let us get to the final push. And that's where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today and just give them your best final words of advice and push them to pursue their creative passions. And I know you've done this once before, but if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So I'm talking to the artist who is out there who it doesn't know. You don't know what you're going to be able to create in the future. There are projects that right now are not on your radar. They're, so for instance, when I started out, I remember one of the first jobs I got was at the University of Maryland as a graphic designer, and right out of high school. And I was doing, it wasn't really a graphic design official job. It was I was learning graphic design as I was making posters and flyers and announcements in a newsletter for dining services for the dining services for the university. But my boss, she was seeing what I was doing, and every now and then there'd be a poster where she's like, you could do a drawing on here, draw a hot dog or something, something stupid, draw some food or some, I don't know. I got an opportunity to do artwork, and I remember her saying, you could be an illustrator. And that was like the first time anybody ever believed in me that I could make art as a career. And she's like, you could actually do this. You'd probably want to go to school and take it seriously, but I think you have the potential to do it. And at that time, all I was in my mind, the only question was, will I be able to become an illustrator? Will I ever get to that point? Because then a year or two later, I did go to art school, and I did check myself into an illustration program, and I did almost get kicked out of it because I wasn't good enough. And, so the whole time I'm asking myself, am I going to be able to do this? And that's the question that so many people have. And at first, that's all I cared about was, will someone else hire me to make a drawing that they pay me for? And I could go through the timeline. I finished school, and all of a sudden I start getting a few little jobs, little tiny ones for a magazine where it's like $250, and I make this piece of art and they pay me. And it's like, wow, at least for today, I'm a professional illustrator, and I haven't made it yet, but I'm making it, I'm doing it. And then going from that to getting bigger jobs and going from there. And I'm fast forwarding through a 30-year career where that didn't do it for me anymore. Just working for someone else was like, it was great. And it was, and I made a great living doing it. And there were years where I made well over six figures just on freelance alone. And it was great. But after a while, I think the artist in every illustrator, if they really become successful, because I've seen this in just about every illustrator friend that I have, is you want to do your own thing. You getting paid to do someone else's dream is cool, but coming up with your own IP, coming up with your own project and your own creation is an itch that I think every true artist really has in them. And gallery artists, they kind of jump into that right away. Like that's kind of the thing. They get to start saying what they want to say right away. But, I come from the illustration route, and it took me a long time to figure out some of the things that I wanted to say and some of the things that I wanted to do. But my creative push is you have projects inside of you. And in order to get to those amazing projects that, that the world is waiting to see from you, that you're going to be able to look back at while you're on this earth and even beyond, the things that the mark that you're going to be able to leave, those have to be cultivated by doing all the other artwork, the hours and hours and hours, the years of artwork that will lead up to changing your mind, preparing your mind in a way that it's not prepared for now. So a lot of artists, they're like, well, I don't know. I have no idea what I even want to do. And my response to that usually is, you probably just haven't created enough art yet. You haven't done enough for other people. You just haven't made enough to where you start to develop your artist vision towards the things that you really want to create, the things that you'll really want to do. And the sad thing for a lot of artists is, by the time they figure that out, they don't have much time left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the sooner you get started on making lots of art, and even if you're making lots of bad art, that's what I did. Eventually you'll get to a point where you can have a vision and you can execute that vision almost exactly as you envisioned it in your mind. And that's when it really becomes fun, because then it's like cause and effect. You get an idea and you make it happen, and you execute, and then people respond to it. And it's just a really fun place to be in. And I feel like I'm kind of getting into that space right now where, if I had a vision for this book, and as soon as I realized that I was going to be making this book, I was like, oh, I'm going to do really well with this book. People really want this book. I would have wanted this book. This is exactly the book that I wanted when I got out of school. And I found the book that was right for me at that time. And now, since times have changed, this is the book that I would have wanted when I was a student. If I was a student coming out right now, this is what I would have wanted. And it's just, I know it's very rewarding to be able to do something like this. So that's my creative push, is you got to start really creating a lot of art. And we didn't talk about video games, but video games really can get in the way of creativity for a lot of artists.
Yep.
I know we're supposed to be wrapping up, but just let me say, as one gamer to another, I was a full-on addict on StarCraft for 10 years. I was in 3 different clans.
Man, StarCraft gets a lot of people.
Oh my gosh. My wife broke 2 of the discs that I had. And when I brought the 3rd one in, she's like, you're going to have to kick this habit on your own this time. I'm not getting involved. And that was back in the early 2000s. And I look at the amount of time that I spent on that game, and it was fun, but it came at a huge cost. My income went way up after I got rid of that game, after those 10 years. And, a lot of people say, well, I can, a lot of my students will say, well, is 1 hour a day too much? And my answer to that is, everybody's art takes different amounts of time to execute. So 1 hour a day to some artists would be very costly, and 1 hour a day to other artists would fit in to their schedule. And at the end of the day, I would say the better question is, are you able to achieve your goals? Are you able to get enough artwork done to where you feel like you're getting better every day? And the best example that I use is that the story of The Pursuit of Happiness, the movie that they made with Will Smith, where he didn't have enough time in the day to go to the bathroom to achieve his goals. So he drank less, which is, I don't know if that's a good idea to mess with your health. But I mean, like that was his, when he was working for Dean Witter, that was his answer was, if I'm going to beat the competition and become financially successful, I have to be different. I have a lot of catching up to do. Therefore, I can't drink as much. Therefore, I won't go to the bathroom as much. Therefore, I'll be able to make more calls, and I'll be able to be more successful than the guys next to me, and they will hire me full time. Are you willing to bleed for your art? That might be a question to leave it at.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and congratulations on the book. And you've already had a successful launch so far, and I wish you all the success. But I'm so happy for you with creating this book that's been on your mind, but also so happy that this book was kind of there for you in a time that you needed it to get you back on like the creative path. So I'm just so happy for you, and I really wish you all the best, my friend.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
No, of course. And for everybody that's interested in Will's art or to check out the book, you can head to willterry.com. On Instagram, he is Will Terry Art, and we'll have links to the Kickstarter, the 3 Points Perspective podcast, everything we talked about today at yourcreativepush.com/363. Will, thanks again.
Hey, thank you.
My thank you to Will once again for coming on the show. A zillion takeaways that I could leave you with from this episode. The one that I'm going to actually choose to leave you with, though, is the notion, the thought that you are stuck. As a creative person, you are stuck with the fact that you're a creative person. It's a burden, but it's also a blessing. The fact that when life throws you a problem, when life throws you a curveball, something that you can't find a solution to, something that somebody else hasn't figured out the solution to, it is your job, it is your duty, not just to yourself, but to the world, to solve that problem. So whether it is something around the house, like my kitchen drawer, or if it is something out in the world, like Will's snowboard, or if it is something within you, something related directly to your art making process. You might be frustrated at first. It might feel like you walked up to a brick wall, but it is your duty to figure out how to walk around that wall, or how to tear that wall down, or how to figure out how to drill a hole into that wall to get through to the other side. Those are the moments that make us not want to sit down and do the work because we're afraid to solve those problems. Because it requires that extra brain power, and it requires a concerted effort to figure out how to get past that. But it's in that effort, it's in that struggle that you actually feel so wonderful once you have figured it out, once you have figured out how to take what's in your brain or in your heart and get it out onto paper or onto the canvas or whatever it is that you use to create. So instead of shying away from facing those problems, instead, look at them as opportunities to grow, as opportunities to level up not just your artistic skills, but your confidence and your happiness as a creative person. Embrace the fact that you are a creative soldier and take on that role because, like I said, you are stuck with it. Don that creative uniform and take on that problem-solving mentality so that you can be much more fulfilled in all aspects of your life. A couple of housekeeping notes here at the end. I'm going to be taking a couple of weeks off the podcast for a few reasons. One, because I'm back to work. I've been back to work for the past 3 weeks, and the casino is thriving, I guess is the word. I've been working overtime. It's super crowded as people are resuming their essential activities, like playing poker. So I'm a little bit overwhelmed with work and don't have as much time to get to the podcast. And number two, I promised you when I burnt myself out a few months ago and had to take that long hiatus that I wouldn't let myself get to that point again, that I'd be honest and upfront and cool off as I needed to so that I didn't hit that wall and need a multi-month break. So I'll be taking 2, maybe 3 weeks off of the podcast. I'll have a best of episode for you in the interim. And if you need some inspiration, and if you haven't checked out my YouTube channel yet, it is in full swing at this point. Aside from the episodes being uploaded on there, I have a bunch of shorter, bite-sized videos to give you inspiration. So far, I've covered topics like how to deal with negative comments, what I call the middle finger method, why you should copy other artists' work, how to get lucky breaks as an artist, how to beat art block forever, why your art sucks, and the ugly middle stages of creativity, just to name a few of them. If you want to check out the channel, you can head to youtube.com/yourcreativepush. But that's all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. Create something amazing, and we will be here for you in a few weeks if you need that push again. I love you all so much, and don't forget willterry.com to check out Will's Kickstarter. We'll see you next time. Hey YouTubers, if you like this episode, I handpicked another one for you. I think you'll like it just as much. Just click it right there on the left side of your screen. And on the right is a playlist of episodes from guests that came from the same creative field as the one that you just listened to. And please don't forget to hit that like button on your way out before it goes away. Enjoy the next episode.